you could probably tell from that introduction, today we're going to put in some spool speed bearings into the old KastKing Speed Demon. Now why? What's the deal with these? Why do it? Well, it was something I looked into quite a while ago. Looked at some Boca bearings, but for the price, $35, $40 for a pair of them, it wasn't something I wanted to do bad enough. It's something that was supposed to take your reel, give it less startup inertia so you could cast lighter baits easier, and you could also cast baits farther because it gives a whole lot less tension on that spool, lets it spin more freely. So today we'll be looking at changing the two main bearings in the reel. So I'm going to take you through how to change the side plate bearing and how to change the bearing on your spool, that little guy right there. Now this will be the same for reels if you're doing just those two. However, other reels may be put together a little bit differently depending on the brand that you have, or if you're changing out other bearings. I'm only covering those two. So why spool speed bearings? Why now? What's the deal with them? Well, I was turned on to spool speed bearings at the Bassmaster Classic, and when I was down there hanging out with KastKing, a huge thanks to them for giving me the opportunity to hang out there, I got a chance to walk around one day, and I stopped by a few different booths. Now, one of the booths was Spool Speed, and the reason I was turned on to them, they were so much different than a few of the other ones that I stopped at. Some of them, you just kind of got a high and they moved on their business. Some of them, I was like a thorn in their side. It was awful. I could not believe some of the booths. They were just like, oh, well, here's what? And to some of them, I was like a nuisance. They're like, well, I don't know what your question is. Spool Speed was different. When I talked to Scott at Spool Speed, you could tell he was very, very energetic about his product. He definitely believed in it, and he answered any sort of questions I had. Very personable guy. And those are the places that I would rather do business with. Good people, companies that stand behind their product and believe in it, and they're trying to make a difference. I'm just a regular everyday angler, and you could tell from some of the booths they had, more expensive stuff. Maybe I wasn't some Bassmaster Pro or, some kid on a collegiate tour. That's fine, but you should still have respect for just the everyday angler. So that's really what turned me on to them, and I thought, you know what? I want to try some because if they can help people out, these are a lot more affordable than some of the other brands out there. For a 2-pack to do these, I think it was like $13. So very affordable change you can make to them. So I thought, you know what, if this is something I can try and actually help people out, then by all means, I would definitely like to show them. Now, there's nothing wrong with the bearings in these reels at all. KastKing uses the Maxiter corrosion-resistant shielded ball bearings, which are good. When you spin them, they spin a lot better than some of the other reels that I already have just stock. However, I figure if you can take it that next step and turn the Speed Demon into a KastKing Speed Demon, or KastKing Speed... If I can help people out and improve on an already solid setup, then by all means I want to try it. So let's get started. Okay, so let's get started. We're going to start with the side plate bearing. This is the easier of the two to get out. Now to remove this, all you'll need is a pair of pliers. I've got some from my soldering set. They make it really easy because they got the pointed ends there. And you can grab that little wire retainer very easily. Now you'll also need some sort of device to get it out. I've got a little deal here that's got just a little tiny miniature crowbar on the end of it. It's also for soldering. It worked really well for me for getting this out because it's kind of a tight fit. Now I know on some of them, people have used like a Q-tip and stuck a Q-tip in here and pulled it out. I wasn't able to get it out that way, so I had to use this little tool. All right, what do we need to do to get started? Well, you can see just above the bearing, there's a little wire retainer. You just have to pull that out. So for me, I'm just going to take these tweezers, get it right behind that wire retainer and grab it right on where this wire retainer starts. And it comes right out, pops right out. Now I should grab it there so I don't lose it, but luckily it kind of stuck to the magnets. But that's what it is. That's what holds that bearing in. So you're going to remove that. Now, again, I know some people have used a Q-tip to remove this bearing. They stick it in there and they were able to pull it out, but it's a pretty tight fit in there. It didn't work for me, so that's why I'm using this little deal. I got it with my soldering set. Now you want to be careful with it. You don't want to mar up your bearing in there, but I'm just going to wiggle it back and forth. When you wiggle it back and forth, it works its way right up and out. That's all there is to taking out your side plate bearing. At this point, you would take your new bearing. You can see the difference there. So the shielded ball bearing, which uses grease inside there, and the ceramic bearing, it's very free. There's no grease in there at all. So we'll put that one in. Installation is easy. You just push that bearing in and then put your wire retainer back on top of it. Now, whoa, be very careful and do this on a large tabletop just so you don't lose that little guy. Now, when you put this back in, there's a little groove or a little shelf that this fits under. You want to make sure that's under it the whole way around. That could cause some problems. So you'll put your wire retainer in there like so, get one side started. Then you'll just take your tweezers right here, pull the other side down and put it under that lip. Now you want to make sure it's under that lip the whole way around. You don't want to have any of that sticking up above there, so make sure it's under that lip. That's all you've got to replacing that bearing. Now this bearing, this guy's a little bit trickier. There are specific tools you can purchase to actually remove this that pushes this pin through for you. I did not purchase any of those. I'm going to be using a pair of channel locks. Now, I stress, be extremely, extremely careful. My channel locks happen to have a flat tip on it right there. So that's very flat. It's very, very smooth. Some channel locks are not like that. If there's any sort of roughness on there, I would take some masking tape and put over the teeth of your pliers so you do not scrape, mar, ding, hurt in any sort of way your spool. If that's not soft, if you put any sort of scratches in that, it will make a difference. So be very, very, very careful here. It's oily. So what do you need to know about changing this bearing out? Well, on some spools, I looked at some of my older reels. One of the sides of this little pin that holds this bearing in will be larger than the other size. It'll have a larger diameter so you can't push it all the way through. If you have one like that and you have the specific tool to change these out, make sure that you're pushing from the small end. You want to push from the small end and push that large side out so you're not trying to push the large side in and damage your spool. Now you're going to be doing the same thing with your pliers as well, being very, very careful. Now this pin is the same on both sides. It's got some texturing in the middle of it that keeps it aligned in the center of your spool, but again, be very, very careful with this step. Now if you're going to use channel locks, again, use some that are smooth, not going to hurt it. And the reason you go with channel locks is because you'll notice that bottom side when you open them up, it's got a little bit of a lip on it. If you try to use straight pliers or needle nose pliers, they're flat, and what you cannot do is line them up like this. When I put these on here, the top one sits right in front of that pin and the bottom one goes right under it. If I had flat pliers, I'd be trying to do it like this and I would just squish that pin. Not good. Okay, so for this step, I'm going to be very, very careful and make sure that I have this straight up and down. I want to make sure that I'm pushing this pin straight up. I don't want to have any sort of weird pressure left or right, and I'm going to slowly squeeze it straight up. I do not want to bend that pin. So I'm going to be very, very, very careful when I do that, not to scratch this, and push it straight. From there, I took a tiny screwdriver, and all I'm doing with that screwdriver is going to put it right on top of that pin, right there, and push it the rest of the way out. Like so. You hear it click through when it pushes almost all the way through. Now I've got my tweezers again. I'm going to grab that pin, give it a little bit of a wiggle, and pull it out of there. Just like so. Now that's the pin. Be very, very careful with this not to lose it. Do it on a large table or something where you're not going to misplace that. And that's the bearing that you're looking to get to. So I'm just going to take my tweezers, and that's it. So that one's just a little bit trickier. Pull that one out. Now, the spool speed bearings were not an exact fit for the actual spool bearing. So I didn't put a spool speed bearing in there, but what I did was put a regular bearing that I had degreased in there. So it makes that bearing spin very smoothly as opposed to a bearing with grease. It quiets it down a lot, but it diminishes the performance of that bearing. It doesn't spin as freely or as long. So to put that in, you just put your new bearing in there. I'm going to go back to my pin. Now again, if your pin had different sides, make sure that you're taking the small side and inserting it into the spool. Again, mine were the same size on both sides. I get it pushed in there with my finger. I'm going to again take my channel locks on the lip that comes out to the bottom, put my pin on there, and ever so gently make sure I am 100% straight when I do this. I don't want to bend it. I'm going to gently push that up in there, just like that. Good and even, that's ready to go back in the reel. So now you can see what the difference is like after I get this put back in there. Again, not that it needed it. I mean, the bearings in here were already good, but if I can add to some casting distance, I'm excited to see how it'll do. Now, what's the first thing you notice when you get them in there? Ceramic bearings definitely do make more noise than your regular greased bearings, and that's a turnoff for a lot of people. They say, well, it sounds loud and scratchy, and what's the deal with it? I don't mind it. I think it's kind of a cool sound. Now, he does sell, at Spool Speed, they do sell the high-speed bearing oil. You don't want to use like your regular, gun oil or real oil. It's a lot more viscous than the oil that comes for these. This is more like a liquid, more for a higher speed bearing. But you can see the difference. You remember from the intro, this spool spun about, 8 seconds. Definitely goes a lot longer than 8 seconds now. The other one goes close to a minute. And I haven't re-oiled this one or anything like that. they go for quite some time. The difference is pretty crazy. So just because it spins doesn't mean it's actually going to help the performance. So I do want to go out and do some testing with these. I'm going to put the regular bearings back in this one. In a future video coming up here, I'm going to be doing some casting tests. And the cool thing is, since both of these reels are the same, I'll have stock bearings in one, a spool speed and a clean bearing in the other, and see how big the difference is. And I can just replace the spool in each one to do my testing and see where they come out. So let me know. Let me know in the comments below if you would like to see a test like that. Another test that I thought about would be one with a spool speed bearing and a cleaned degreased bearing versus one with two cleaned degreased bearings, to see if you clean those out and remove the grease, will you get just as much performance as you would with a ceramic bearing. Thought that can be kind of interesting. So let me know in the comments below what you think. Let me know if you have any questions about changing out your bearings. I'll be happy to help if I can. If you've not already subscribed to my channel for more informative videos just like this one, please consider doing so. And if you have any other sort of ideas for videos, drop them in the comments below. I love hearing from all my supporters. So till next time.